And so the engineer, my God, terrorists are going to stop my train. So he put the thing down and went through and ran the train over Brian Wilson. Once again, a demonstration, a glimmer of what's in store for us under these new laws. Vern Lyon got caught up in some CI operations, was kidnapped out of Peru, brought back to the United States and trial. He had been working for the CI in Cuba. He was not permitted to introduce his CI files into the trial to show that he had in fact been working for the government at the time the alleged crime took place. The judge took charge of the trial, directed what questions could and could not be asked, and he was sentenced to 17 years. The appeals court threw it out, and so they retried him using the same judge, they said, because this judge now had been briefed and understood national security, and once again he manipulated the trial and once again got Vern convicted and sentenced to 17 years, of which he served 6 and then was let out on parole. Rewald was caught in an SNL CI cover scandal in Hawaii. The people investigating said he had manipulated some money. The CI was so desperate to keep the truth from coming out that they had the CI General Counsel resign his job in Washington and be appointed as Assistant District Attorney to prosecute the case in Hawaii. Now, that in itself is kind of interesting and kind of insidious in terms of the defendant's rights, but the judge absolutely, vigorously, angrily forbade either the defense or any of the attorneys involved from revealing the fact to the jury that the CI had sent its own general counsel to run the trial to make sure that its secrets did not come out and that Rewald was isolated, cut off from any defense, and would in fact go to jail, where he's sitting right now. The Walker brothers, selling secrets to the Soviet Union. Little sympathy for them. However, the government's point was that the secrets had been delivered to the Soviet Union. They were making this case in a public trial, and yet they managed to claim and to intimidate the press from reporting what was happening in the public trial. This is national security information in a national security trial. Cy Hirsch, NBC, Washington Post, others were threatened by the CI, intimidated, bullied with some success not to report what happened in fact in this trial. You recall the invasion of Grenada in October of 1983, in which the press was excluded from the invasion. So all the information we got about it was U.S. Army Psy-war propaganda. Afterwards, the press complained, and so General Seidel worked out a compromise solution where in future invasions there will be a press pool of people who will go with the invading force and report through the landing force commander's controlled communication system to the New York Times and the Washington Post about what supposedly is going on in the invasion. So we'll get the truth about it, of course, I assure you. Then you have Turner versus Harvard, or the CIA versus Harvard. Harvard University was so penetrated with CIA agents, recruitments of professors, that they passed a ruling that any professor who had contact with the CIA would have to report that contact to the administration just so the university would know it. And the CIA sued and won, establishing the right for the CI to have private relationships to recruit and manipulate and control professors on campuses without the university itself knowing about it. On the other hand, while they have rigged the laws now so that they can have national security control in trials to prevent the defense from bringing out information that would exonerate them, on the other hand, they reversed themselves in the Iran-Contra scandal and used the laws in the opposite direction. Ollie North was let off from the heavy charges against him because he subpoenaed President Bush and President Reagan and Vice President Bush. And mind you, this was the man who won the nation's hearts by saying he would take the spears in his chest, he would stand on his head for the commander-in-chief. But when his ass was really on the line in trial, he subpoenaed them to drag them out so that they would be questioned, so that they would go down with him. Now, the major charges were dropped against him, and this phony Iran-Contra hearing was held in such a way that it would, in fact, as we noted at the time, impede any effective prosecution of the people guilty. And now his charges are being whacked away in the appeals court, and of course he will not do jail time, nor do I think will Poindexter. or anyone else in the scandal for that matter, despite the corruption and abuse and destruction of files and breaking dozens of laws. Meanwhile, the CIA people involved in the Iran-Contra scandal, who were more directly in touch with the people smuggling the drugs down in Central America, they were blocked from any trial whatsoever because the CIA said that national security secrets would be brought out in public if these people were put on trial. This is despite the fact that they acknowledged tacitly that all of the secrets had been brought out in the hearings and in the newspapers anyway. Nevertheless, using the law in the other direction to prevent the prosecution of people in the national security complex and hold them responsible for their crimes. Now, getting to FEMA. This is utterly fascinating, I think, and breathtaking. What has been developed and slipped in on this society right now. We're talking about what exists right now. It begins back in 1969 when they created this special training institute in San Luis Obispo at the National Guard camp under Governor Reagan, Governor of California Reagan's supervision. They set up, the purpose of it was to teach leaders in the society who would be responsive to this kind of training in population control. Governor Reagan addressed the first session of this seminar, and he gave a speech, a remark, which, mind you, we have the syllabus, we have the training, we have a great deal of detail about this thing because so many people have gone through it. But he said words to the effect, this is not a direct quote, but it's close. He said, you know, there are people who, if they could see us here assembled today and hear what I'm saying, would conclude that I'm planning a military takeover of the United States. Ha, 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 ha. And that was the way he started off his talk at this thing. They had a fictional town set up called San Luis, as in San Luis Obispo, using the map of the city, broken into sections with black, white, Chicano, wealthy, and then different law plans they would study about what troops they would put where to control and what techniques and how to infiltrate groups to discredit them, to play them one against the other. Again, we have the syllabus of the training of this thing. They've managed to trot through this thing. It's gone on for a considerable amount of time. National Guard generals, DOD generals, police chiefs, sheriffs, marshals, city officials, corporate executives, through to such an extent that by 1979, Associated Press reported that they had trained 14,000 people in this seminar in the techniques of population control. Then President Reagan got into office. 1980, he won the election, 1981, and they created FEMA and put Luis Giuffrida in charge, a man who'd been associated with the National Guard, who had no rank, but he liked to be called General Giuffrida. He was close to Oliver North, as a matter of fact, as came out later on. By 1984, we'd picked this up in the public domain. I think Spotlight magazine was the first one to begin writing about it. Eventually, we got contact with people who had been in it, who had been through the training, but also people in the management of it. What they've done very simply is create a plan for the suspension of the Constitution and martial law in the United States in the times of national security emergencies, such as nuclear war, such as the next war, as in Vietnam. Remember, Governor Reagan was in a state of rage over the Vietnam War. He, having said, as he saw 4 wars, but he saw them from Hollywood, with makeup and ketchup for blood and all of these dramatic films he was doing about what war, was really, he thought it was a fun thing, and he thought it was a real chicken generation of young people that didn't want to go to Vietnam and fight and that were protesting. And don't forget, he was calling out the National Guard and giving, with loaded weapons, and giving them orders to shoot, to kill in California. This was his idea, and he made many speeches about it, about how if he had a war when he was president, how he would control the society so there wouldn't be any of the nonsense, as he put it, that happened during the Vietnam War. So FEMA set out to plan across the nation in detail which units they would call out, to put on which street corners, to take over which radio stations, to control the society under martial law in a state of national emergency, which they would have the authority to declare, i.e. our elected officials would not get to vote on it. They created bases. One of the problems in the Vietnam War was that they would arrest several thousand people and didn't have anywhere to take them, to hold them, while they prosecuted them for possible indictment. They created bases so that they could put away 400,000 people. put them in camps, and then eventually process the papers on them if they wanted to bother. They said dissidents and aliens, people who would be protesting the war. They talked in their speeches and discussions